A mother put her daughters to bed, but when she went to their room the next morning, one of the girls was missing. The police quickly joined the search, realizing she clearly hadn't left the house of her own accord. Despite uncovering some shocking clues, the search for the answers spanned years. Eventually, detectives managed to unravel the truth, and it was truly shocking. Kirsten Hatfield was born on February 12, 1989, in Midwest City, Oklahoma. The girl's father left the family right after her birth, leading their mother, Shannon, to move to her parents' house. They helped her raise the child, and when Kirsten turned 2, they moved to their own home. Later, Shannon got married again, and her second daughter, Faith, was born. This marriage also didn't last long, leaving the woman to raise her daughters alone. Despite her young age, Kirsten helped her mother take care of her younger sister. Thanks to this, she became very independent and got along pretty well with Faith. The girls shared a bedroom, while their mother slept in the next one. On the evening of May 13, 1997, when Kirsten was 8 years old and her sister 3, Shannon prepared the girls for sleep. Usually, she reads them a story, but this time, Faith had already fallen asleep, and the woman didn't want to wake her. She wished her older daughter a good night and went to her bedroom, leaving the door to the girls' room slightly ajar. She did this every night in case either of the girls woke up and called her. Somewhere around 3 a.m., Shannon was awakened by a noise coming from her daughter's room. Thinking the girls had woken up, she went to their room. However, as soon as she reached the corridor and approached the door to their bedroom, the noise stopped. Assuming the girls had gone back to sleep, she decided not to wake them and was about to return to her room. But before she did, something strange caught her eye. The door to the girls' room was completely closed, although Shannon always left it slightly open. She thought one of the girls might have closed the door, or she herself had forgotten to leave it open. Shannon approached the door, opened it slightly, but didn't enter the room, then went back to sleep. The next morning, around 6:30 a.m., Shannon went to wake the girls. She entered their bedroom and found that only her younger daughter, Faith, was in bed. She woke her up and asked where Kirsten was, but Faith didn't know. The woman immediately began searching the entire house, but the girl was nowhere to be found. She looked outside, then called all of her friends, whose children Kirsten was friends with. She hoped the girl had gone to one of them, but they all said they hadn't seen her. After that, Shannon called her father, who lived nearby. Her last hope was that the girl had gone to him, but he also hadn't seen her. Realizing that Kirsten had disappeared, he told Shannon to call the police and went to their house. So, the woman called 911, and officers arrived at the scene within a few minutes. Initially, they thought the girl might have been hiding somewhere in the house or had gone for a walk. In their quiet town, there had never been a case of a child being abducted from their own bedroom, so the local police had never encountered anything like it. However, soon the officers realized the situation was much more serious. Upon inspecting Kirsten's room, they found the window slightly ajar with a few drops of blood on the frame. The police went outside and began examining the area around the window. A few yards away, they discovered a piece of children's underwear on the ground, stained with blood. The officers asked Shannon to confirm that it belonged to her daughter, and she recognized it. Investigators realized they were likely dealing with a kidnapping, and more officers were immediately called to the scene. When they searched the area behind and around the house, police questioned the girl's mother. She recounted waking up at 3 a.m. after hearing a noise. Suddenly, she realized that at that moment, an unknown criminal was likely abducting Kirsten. The search around the house yielded no results, and the police started interviewing all residents in the neighborhood. Unfortunately, none of them saw or heard anything suspicious that night. The only lead detectives could gather was that one of the neighbors was awakened by a dog barking around 3 a.m., coinciding with the time of the abduction. Failing to find any solid leads, investigators turned to a child psychologist to speak with Faith. Despite being only 3 years old, she shared that she had witnessed the abduction. However, she kept repeating only one phrase: "A bad person came and took my sister." This once again confirmed that the girl did not leave the house willingly, but it provided no further clues to identify the perpetrator or locate Kirsten. Detectives had to restart the investigation practically from scratch. Their initial suspicion leaned towards someone who knew Kirsten well, as it seemed unlikely that a stranger could abduct her from her own room without a sound. Working on this theory, police discovered that the girl's mother had a history of drug-related problems. The detectives considered the possibility that the abduction might be related to this. Perhaps the mother owed money to some people in the criminal underworld, and they decided to take her daughter as payment. The alternative was even more chilling. The police did not rule out the mother willingly handing over her daughter. This would explain why the abduction happened almost silently. They spoke with Shannon, but she denied any involvement. She claimed to have been clean from illegal substances for a long period of time and insisted she would never give away her daughter. Detectives didn't rush to clear her of suspicions, but they couldn't find any evidence to support the mother's involvement. So, the police decided to seek the public's help, reaching out through the media, asking people to share any information related to the case. In the following days, the police department received hundreds of calls, and detectives diligently followed up on each lead. Most of them were quite superficial and lacked any valuable information. However, investigators soon stumbled upon some disturbing tip. A woman called in, suspecting her boyfriend of being involved in a kidnapping. He had been behaving aggressively, even stating during an argument that if she didn't obey him, he would do to her what he did to Kirsten Hatfield. As the police began investigating this man, they uncovered another alarming fact. He was acquainted with Shannon's brother, meaning Kirsten might have known him. Moreover, the girls and their mother lived in a house that previously belonged to her brother, leading the investigators to believe that the suspect might have been familiar with the layout. The man also had a history that brought him into the police's view, including involvement with drugs and even assault. Everything pointed to him possibly being connected to the crime. However, the man claimed he was at a bar that night. Police verified this information, and numerous witnesses confirmed his alibi, placing him at the bar until around 4 a.m., eliminating the possibility of him abducting the girl. Following this, investigators pursued hundreds of other leads, but all of them led to dead ends. The case stretched over months, and with each passing day, hope of finding Kirsten alive dwindled. Her mother couldn't just wait and do nothing as the police repeatedly hit dead ends. From the early days, she tried everything in her power to locate her daughter. She gave interviews to the local media, distributed flyers, and even personally investigated various suspects. In her quest for the truth, Shannon faced numerous challenges. For instance, she came up with the idea of reaching out to local businesses in the county, asking them to put flyers about Kirsten in their offices, stores, and establishments. To her surprise, many refused, citing it contradicted company policies. She also attempted to secure a meeting with the state governor, but it was unsuccessful. Shannon also organized a small center with the goal of attracting volunteers to Kirsten's case. They mainly focused on distributing flyers and engaging with the media, but Shannon encountered new problems. Some volunteers stole money, others lied about the work done, and used the media to draw attention to themselves. Despite all of this, she never gave up trying to unravel the truth for many years. At one point, Shannon realized that the current approach wasn't yielding any results, prompting her to take a different path. She enrolled in college, earned a degree in criminology, and became a parole officer. Shannon chose this path not only to find her daughter's kidnapper, but also to protect others from criminals who might be released from prison and still pose a threat. She strongly believed that the person who took Kirsten had other criminal convictions. In her detailed study of individuals with violent pasts in her town and surrounding areas, she attempted to find any connection to her daughter's abduction. However, in the end, all of these efforts yielded no results. At some point, Shannon resigned herself to the likelihood that Kirsten was probably no longer alive and she would never be able to bring her back. Nevertheless, she never abandoned her quest for answers completely. The police occasionally reopened the case, examining new leads, but it yielded no results. In collaboration with the FBI, they even created a sketch of what Kirsten might look like years after the abduction. No one believed she was still alive, yet without her remains, they couldn't declare this with absolute certainty. The stagnation in the case lasted for many years until an unexpected turn of events. In 2014, a woman called the police with a rather bizarre story. Her grandmother had recently passed away, and as she sorted through the remaining belongings, she found a diary. In it, the grandmother detailed how her own son had confessed to killing Kirsten Hadfield. The narrative contained such a wealth of details that detectives had no doubt about the authenticity of the information. According to the diary, the man abducted Kirsten from her bedroom and took her to a nearby town where he owned a house. There, he subjected her to heinous acts and brutally murdered her. The description of the entire process spanned several pages, leaving even seasoned investigators horrified. Furthermore, the diary mentioned that the entire ordeal was recorded on videocassette. Detectives immediately brought in the woman's son for questioning. While they anticipated him denying everything, his words surprised them even more. He claimed no involvement in the crime, but knew who committed it because the girl was killed in his ex-girlfriend's house. This perplexed the police, prompting them to ask the man for the address of this house. Detectives swiftly obtained a warrant and sent in a team to thoroughly examine the property. Their first step involved spraying luminol, a substance that emits a glow upon contact with even the tiniest traces of blood, even if it had been cleaned from the scene of the crime. When the forensic experts did this, they were met with genuine shock. One of them later stated that the entire house lit up like a Christmas tree. The chemical revealed that blood was practically everywhere, and most importantly, the blood-stain patterns matched the gruesome details of the murder described in the diary. Experts removed floorboards, cut out sections of wallpaper, and sent out everything to the lab. They also assembled a team for excavations on the property, hoping to find the girl's body. In addition, the police found a box in the house containing hundreds of videocassettes, prompting them to recall the diary. They knew that one of these tapes should contain footage of the victim being abused. Detectives meticulously reviewed each tape, a process that took countless hours. However, none of the cassettes contained anything relating to the murder. The excavations also yielded no results. There were no remains or any evidence in the soil on the property. But then, the detectives faced the most unexpected twist. Experts analyzing the remains of the bloodstains in the house concluded that the blood belonged to an animal, not a human. This came as an absolute shock to the police, as they were convinced they were finally on the verge of solving Kirsten's case. Instead, investigators faced yet another false lead. What this was exactly remains unknown. Perhaps someone decided to play a cruel joke on the police, or the diary was penned by an individual with mental health issues who saw information about the girl's abduction on the news and believed in a narrative being born in their mind. Nevertheless, detectives continued to hope that sooner or later they would uncover the truth. However, no new leads emerged, and the case once again came to a standstill. In the summer of 2015, Kirsten's case was handed over to a new detective named Daryl Miller, who decided to initiate a fresh investigation. He studied all the existing documents and records, and at some point, he noticed something peculiar. To his surprise, Miller realized that over all these years, his predecessors hadn't examined the crucial pieces of evidence: the blood on the windowsill in the victim's room and on her underwear. Although these pieces of evidence were stored in the warehouse for some inexplicable reason, they hadn't been sent to the lab for analysis. Perhaps, back then, the police thought the blood belonged to the girl, and analyzing it wouldn't yield any results. Miller decided to rectify this and sent the evidence to the lab. Soon, they called him back, stating that both blood samples belonged not to Kirsten, but to an unknown male. This was a long-awaited breakthrough, but the detective faced a new challenge. The abductor's DNA sample was immediately uploaded to the FBI database, but there was no match. This could mean that he hadn't committed serious crimes, or it happened before the database's creation. Nevertheless, Miller was undeterred. He decided to collect DNA samples from all the men involved in the case since the abduction. The police compiled a list, located each person, and sent their DNA to the lab. Surprisingly, every individual willingly provided their samples right away. This led investigators to consider that the murderer might have not been part of the case files. Despite this, Miller patiently awaited the results until he finally got a call from the lab. Experts had completed the analysis of one of the samples and found that it perfectly matched the blood found on the victim's windowsill and underwear. The individual was 56-year-old Anthony Palma, a neighbor of the Hatfield family who lived just across the street from them. Palma was one of the first people the police spoke to on the day of the abduction. Back then, he told them he woke up around 3 a.m. due to his dog barking. Now, with confirmation of his involvement, detectives decided to speak with him again. While DNA evidence was more than sufficient for a conviction in court, investigators hoped to extract a confession. Firstly, it would significantly expedite the trial, and secondly, only he knew where Kirsten's body was, making it nearly impossible to locate her remains without his cooperation. Detectives chose to proceed cautiously. They invited Anthony for questioning, stating it was a routine process. Supposedly, they were re-interviewing everyone, including neighbors, hoping to gather some new information. In reality, they had a specific task: to get him to admit whether he had ever been inside the Hatfield family home. Initially, detectives asked if he remembered anything else from that night. Anthony recounted the same story as 18 years ago. However, this time, he added a new detail. He allegedly saw a white car parked in front of Kirsten's house, but didn't think much of it. Next, the police inquired about his familiarity with the girl and her family. Anthony said he knew them as neighbors, but never interacted with Kirsten personally. He added that during those years, he got along well with other neighborhood kids. For instance, they occasionally asked him to fix their bikes, or stopped by for candy. Subsequently, the police asked if he had ever been inside Kirsten's house. Perhaps the girl's mother had asked him for help, or he had visited just to chat. However, Anthony claimed he had never been inside the house while the family lived there. For the detectives, this became a crucial moment for the interrogation. Considering the man's blood was found on the windowsill from the victim's room, they had just caught him in a lie. Thanks to this, in court, he wouldn't be able to claim that the blood got there under different circumstances, like when he visited the neighbors on another day. However, there was a problem. The house where Kirsten lived had previously belonged to Anthony's friend, and he admitted to visiting it during those years. But the blood sample on the windowsill was clearly fresh and couldn't have been left there many years ago. However, detectives decided to move on to the main part and informed him that his blood was found in Kirsten's room and on her underwear. Anthony began denying this, repeating that he had never been inside their home. Investigators tried to extract a confession, but he consistently stuck to his denial. Then, they opted to change tactics and left the room. Detective Miller entered to speak with Anthony. He brought along a photo of Kirsten, placing it on the table in front of the suspect. Anthony immediately pushed it away and avoided looking at the photo for the rest of the conversation. Miller asked him various questions, hoping Anthony would eventually slip up, but he continued to deny everything. Realizing they wouldn't extract a confession, the police decided to finish the interrogation and arrested the man. Following this, they obtained a search warrant for his house, thoroughly excavated the entire area, but couldn't find any trace of the girl's remains or any other evidence. During the trial, Anthony persisted in denying his involvement, but the results of the DNA analysis spoke for themselves. In court, additional details emerged that police had overlooked during the initial investigation. It turned out Anthony had prior run-ins with the law. Several years before Kirsten's abduction, he had intruded into another girl's bedroom and assaulted her. He had also been imprisoned in the 80s for a weapon-related attack. This further underscored Anthony's status as a dangerous criminal, but for some reason, his past convictions were overlooked in 1997. In late 2017, the jury found him guilty of Kirsten's abduction and murder, sentencing Anthony to life in prison. Throughout the trial, he never revealed the location of her remains, and the police doubt they'll ever find the girl. The problem lies in Anthony's employment with the Park Services. Familiar with remote areas, he could have buried the body where investigators might never reach. Nevertheless, the victim's mother persisted in trying to find her daughter. She regularly called Anthony and visited him in prison, spending hours seeking answers. With each interaction, she felt the criminal was getting closer to disclosing the body's whereabouts, but it never happened. In early 2019, Anthony was killed by his cellmate, driven by personal animosity stemming from Anthony's crime against the child. As a result, the Kirsten family's sole hope to locate the girl's body rests on the chance that hunters or travelers may stumble upon it in remote national parks. Alright guys, please share your thoughts on this story in the comment section, and don't forget to hit the like button if you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching.